Could you bring me a cornetto while you're out? Cheers.
Perfect time to talk Chaotix Casefiles.
Excellent idea.
Well. First April Fool's meme game with Sonic is murdered, and now a random old-timey radio play. It's the weird little side projects that end up with the better written stories of the series. I have no idea how this came about, but apparently Realm and Sega worked together to create this random audio play starring the Chaotix.
Realm is a podcast company making several serials, including a lot of DC and Marvel ones, along with their own original shows. And now Sonic.
Apparently so. Comes the heck out of nowhere for me. Part of the anniversary, I guess? I mean, hey, I'm not complaining. I'm just caught off guard, that's all. Anyway, Dissected isn't really meant to be a review show kind of thing, so I'm not really going into the whole thing and review it. I just want to discuss a few points that interest me. So to get a gist of my opinion right out of the gate, yeah, it's pretty good. I enjoyed it. It's very fun to listen to. Great acting, nice tone, good characterizations. It's good stuff. Do have a few critical things to point out, as usual. Not that they bother me too much or ruin the fun, but things I find a little interesting to discuss regardless. I'll go deeper into this later, but it is a bit disappointing that despite this being a detective-themed show, even as a radio play, it doesn't really play as a real mystery story whodunit kind of thing, as it's way more about big fan service moments with shocking character reveals, making it a little meta for me, I guess. As in, the thrills and excitement the show wants to generate comes more from, oh my god, it's this character, rather than the actual merits of the plot and mystery itself. Not too big of a problem. It's a big nerd celebration for the most part. But yeah, in a way, I kind of would have preferred if it was more of a series of self-contained, legit detective stories rather than an epic tale that dangles characters around all the time. Oh well. I mean, I guess the Chaotix are supposed to be goofy, silly, not really detectives anyway, so I guess it fits with them, I suppose. Anyway, I don't really want to do a synopsis for all the audio files here, going into the story into depth. Not sure if there's much of a point to it. Story really boils down to there's a bunch of MacGuffins, the astroscopic lenses, whatever that is, that are being stolen by a thief, soon to be believed to be a shapeshifter, and the Chaotix try to prevent further thefts, then run into, oh my god, it's that character of the week in each episode. They try to capture the thief, keep failing, until eventually the case is resolved. And there's the plot. Anyway, here's a few random topics I wanted to discuss a bit. Gotta talk about voice acting, of course. Usually I don't pay too much attention to the voice acting, as long as it generally sounds cool.
Then allow me. They do a clever thing where voice actor Keith Silverstein basically gives Vector 3 different tones. His usual cartoony, "Find the computer room" Vector we know and love, a smooth cigar and whiskey film noir voice for when he narrates, and a voice that's kinda in between for when Vector's talking to clients or enemies. I really like this because besides doing the obvious parody joke where detectives always have to narrate themselves with big lofty metaphors for a laugh, it's a great way to make Vector more capable of carrying the radio play on his shoulders. As fun as his goofy cartoon voice may be, Vector's designed to be a bit player with a silly voice that works when he's a side character occasionally piping in, but having to listen to him go through endless monologues for hours would make it probably quite tough on the ears, not to mention tough on the voice actor's vocal cords. Vector moving back and forth between a smooth narration voice, then sounding like his goofy self when interacting with Espio and Charming, is a great way to make him more tolerable for a main part, while still keeping everything in character and preserving Vector's goofy nature. So yeah, good thinking by the director Ian Jones-Cordy, or whoever on the team came up with it.
I do need to give a quick shout out to Jet and Charmy's voice, Michael Yurchak and Colleen O'Shaughnessy.
It's pronounced O'Shaughnessy.
Everyone always pronounces my name badly too. I got bad pronunciation privileges. These two in particular, I like them because they're voicing characters that are inherently supposed to sound annoying. The hyperactive child and the smug jerk. They manage to do it with a great balance where it's just toned down enough that they're not grating to listen to, even for longer periods of time, and still have plenty of range, while still always sounding correct for the over-the-top cartoon characters it's supposed to be, so that's quite a feat. Kudos.
Colleen's charming voice has evolved a lot over the years. Initially it sounded a little deeper, but after she took over the role of Tails from Kate Higgins, she ended up using that voice for him, leading to Charmy and Tails sounding almost exactly the same in Forces. After this, Colleen tried a few different directions. In Sonic X Shadow Generations, Charmy's voice was higher and even raspier, and then for Sonic Racing Crossworlds, Charmy's voice was a bit smoother, but still slightly higher than Tails's. Here, however, the raspiness is back, but Charmy's voice is much softer and generally missing the hyperactive energy we'd come to expect. It was honestly a bit jarring from how different it sounded, and I found it a little distracting, but that's not to say it was a bad take on the character. Colleen found a way to make Charmy sound different from Tails without making his voice grating to listen to for extended periods of time. It almost feels like Charmy's a little more mature now, which fits with his persistent desire to find his purpose on the team.
And besides that, we have 3 characters speaking for the first time here. Tangle, Whisper, and Gemerald. Pretty good, and exactly what I expected them to sound like. Heard complaints that Whisper's too high-pitched, but sounds fine to me. I love him.
Tangle is voiced by Ashlyn Madden, Whisper is voiced by Neris Quinones, and Gemerald is voiced by Alejandra Saab, also known as Sayu. All 3 of them did a fantastic job, especially Ashlyn, who nailed Tangle's energy. But while we're on the subject, there is a weird bit where Tangle and Whisper are introduced to the new character Mr. Kitsch, who presumes that Whisper is named after her manner of speaking, which Whisper seems to confirm. This is a bit strange. Obviously, Sonic characters' names are notorious for being a bit on the nose, but Whisper didn't always talk like this. Before Mimic's betrayal, she spoke in a totally normal tone. Is perhaps Whisper a code name? Or did it just become self-fulfilling prophecy? Or maybe Whisper was just brushing off the comment. Who knows?
At this point, we're cutting up the entire credits cast. Anyway, last point, I love the sound effects. The sound effects are great in this one. Enough positivity! Time to complain. About things completely unrelated to the actual audio play. Spoiler alert, this audio play ends up being a sequel to Sonic Forces. Well, not for the most part, but it kinda is when he returns. Mr. Dragon Edgy himself, Infinite! I'll discuss the man himself later. What a huge improvement he is on his appearance in Forces. But let's discuss the story circumstances around him first. So, about Sonic Forces, right? Sonic Forces now had these prequel comics. It has IDW largely spending the first couple years of its run as a direct follow-up on it. And now this random Chaotix Casefiles also ends up being another follow-up on Forces. I'm kind of fascinated how much material is spent on Forces, while that game's story itself is such a pile of nothing. I ranted about it before, might as well do it again since it'll be a foundation for a lot of the later points. I have a large issue with most of modern Sonic storytelling, and it's this. Sonic Team tends to only think in concepts. At least that's what it feels like to me. They have a story concept, a very good one, but then the execution is botched. No, wait, that's giving them way too much credit. It's like there's no real story at all, no rhythm, no flow, no thought in how characters go from point A to point B. You just get a vague premise, and then the story just meanders around and fades away without accomplishing much of anything. Shadow Generations, I mean, what the heck is going on in that game? Wow, Maria and Gerald are back! Just so they could stand in an empty void, spout some exposition, and die off again. What's the point? What's the story? They had nothing important to say to Shadow. Gerald doesn't confront Dark Doom. Maria doesn't have any new information. Shadow doesn't try to save them. There's just nothing here. Forces, it has a lot of ideas, but there's no momentum to anything. After introducing the concept of phantom villains, they don't really matter. Oh, Infinite can create any enemy he wants, so here's Metal Sonic for you to fight. That's it. That's what you do with his powers. You can't actually just put the real Metal Sonic there. What does this add? Perfect Chaos is more interesting, but then they never really use his special powers. Sure, we get an evil Shadow for 2 seconds, but he's killed up before doing anything. Or the Sun. That's the perfect example of what bothers me with Sonic Team. So you need the ticking time bomb for the story's climax. And Sonic Team thinks, okay, we have magical powers, so let's do something more dramatic than usual. Instead of just a bomb or a scary laser, let's have them slowly teleport into Sun. So you get more of a sense of impending doom. But then they do nothing. The characters don't get sweaty or start complaining about the heat. We don't see plants wither and burn. Heroes drained of their energy by the intense heat. No, everyone's just running around as usual until Eggman has a literal countdown. 3, 2, 1. Oh, and now the Sun goes from perfectly harmless to instant death. Well, okay, we did get a couple falling fireballs in one of the levels, but that's about it. So why make it a Sun if you just treat it as if it's a normal bomb? Well, because the Sun is more dramatic. Yes, it is more dramatic. Well, you make it behave like an approaching sun. But the increased drama only exists in concept, but not in the execution. It's dramatic because the words imply increased drama, but the visuals of the story don't support it. And it's this disconnect between words and meaning that severely destroys the credibility of the writing of these games, and why me and a lot of others are super cynical when later games name drop characters or imply character developments. Characters can say it in a sentence, but when we don't see it manifest in the visuals, in the action, it feels like the writers are just randomly jamming in words that sound cool for the illusion of drama and meaning, while the actual story itself is still wet toilet paper. And Forces is one of the most guilty of this, peppering details in like Till suffering depression and Sonic being tortured through its script that shocked fans at the time. Oh, this story is so dark. But it's a complete farce where you actually pay attention to the story and notice that there's no substance to any of it. Well, we need an emotional hook to our climax. Quick, have Sonic preach about the meaning of friendship or something to Infinite. That'll give the illusion that this story was about something. Never mind that we know so little about Infinite and his relationships that we have zero frame of reference what a speech like that even means to him.
Not to mention the fact that this supposed power of friendship Sonic is utilizing is because he is with the Avatar character, whom he met a day ago and has literally never spoken a word.
So, back to the point of the actual audio play. Forces leaves me utterly confused at the end credits. What the hell happened with either Infinite or the Phantom Ruby or even Eggman at the climax? We're all awkwardly warped out of the plot without any kind of real closure or clarity. And yet, this quicksand, this shapeless pile of ideas that fade in and out like a Fata Morgana, this is the bedrock now several new media has built upon. How awkward. At least IDW was allowed to show us what happened to Eggman after Forces. Imagine us getting us no context what happened to Eggman. It cut straight from Forces to him immediately being a goofy jackass sabotaging a race like he's Dick Dastardly, with no story context in between. But yeah, the Phantom Ruby, what happened to that thing? Well, I don't know. But look, it's the ending for Sonic CD. Of course, Mania is more concerned about shoving references down your throat than making any sense. And Infinite? Fuck if I know.
It doesn't really matter. IDW quickly found its own rhythm and characters and moved away from Forces, and the Chaotix Casefiles works perfectly fine on its own, minus some details about its villain.
So I have 2 points here. One, if you were actually listening to this radio play as an actual whodunit, an actual mystery for you to solve, it's a bit cheating that the story itself never really says anything about Infinite until he shows up at the end as the bad guy. Yes, you are reminded of his existence. Vector does mention a dimension-shifting villain through his opening monologue, and you do get the Red Spectre clue, a codename thrown around a couple times. But that's it. Infinite isn't really a character, or even much of a concept within the story itself up until his arrival, so it's only through external knowledge of the series you can figure it out. External knowledge that is very wonky indeed. And second, despite the writers getting an opportunity to clarify what happened to the Jackal Squad or Infinite's fate at the end of Forces here through a giant monologue Infinite spouts for near half an episode, it is noticeable that they're still dancing around the issue, making me suspect that Sonic Team's still being extremely unhelpful to the writers cleaning up Forces' mess. With Eggman out of all characters saying the "wasn't he dead, but we never found a body" line as if he's a passive observer to Infinite's fate. Weren't you the one who teleported him to you to take the Phantom Ruby back? You, out of all characters, should know exactly what the hell happened here. And all Infinite has to say about the matter is that he used deception to escape. Escape what? Deceive who? Deceive how without the Phantom Ruby? I don't know. Heck, later he mentions he only got involved with this case through a random acquaintance helping him to get the first acroscopic lens or whatever it is. So, wow, for a whodunit mystery story, there sure are a lot of huge holes left open in the plot. I mean, I'll get to the whodunit mechanics later, but yeah, needless to say, it's clear you're meant to just listen to this as a straightforward action-adventure story. You're not really meant to figure anything out.
The story starts by presenting itself as a classic mystery story, with the Chaotix being sent on a case to solve some mysterious thefts, but there's almost no attempt to actually write it as one. We don't receive clues or foreshadowing, just several red herrings and dead ends. We get a single clue in the form of the Red Spectre file, and it just feels like the writers were really proud of it and decided that was all the foreshadowing we needed. Even the humans from Blue's Clues would wait until they had 3 clues before trying to solve a mystery. Yes, we eventually got a second clue in the form of a redacted file labeled Phantom, but if that didn't make it obvious enough, Vector basically hand-feeds the answer to the audience.
Alright, the mystery might be a bit off, but the personality is on point with Infinite, so let's discuss character. I saw plenty of YouTube videos calling him redeemed, which begs the question, what was wrong with the initial Infinite and what happened in the new show that redeemed him? It's interesting really because initially the reaction I usually get from people why they didn't like Infinite in the original is because he was edgy and try hard.
Which I never quite agreed with. It's mostly just his song. The character himself is kind of bland and nowhere near as edgy as the song made him out to be.
Yeah, for most of the game he's a potato. He doesn't really do that much. And even when he gets a dark edgy scene, like when he's killing a few civilians, it's such a toothless, flat, lifeless little sequence. Are they even dead? Just pushed over? Whatever. I mean, a scene like that probably shouldn't be in a Sonic game anyway, but yeah, if you're gonna do it, then do it. But now the guy's just a bore fest. Now, if you allow me a bit of a tangent, like this whole video wasn't a tangent already, because let's talk about modern Sonic characters for a bit. Like Dodongpa, my favorite. Through Sonic's history, there's always a character that we Sonic fans use as a quick punchline when they're too lame. First it was Big the Cat, and then Omo Chow, and Chris Thorndike. Now, these days, especially for me and my circle of friends, it's good old Dononpa, or whatever. He's my punching bag for whenever I need a lame character as a punchline. And my wife wasn't happy about that. She likes him, or rather, she likes Tanuki characters, because Tanukis are fun, the trickster, shape-shifting, mischievous, always some nutty pranks up their sleeves. And when you write down Drompa's character traits on paper, he sounds like he could be a lot of fun. So he's a rich businessman, obsessed with cars and racing, going around teasing Sonic and friends and getting them into all kinds of rivalries, misunderstandings, and other mayhem to trick them into racing each other. So there's this whole story mode in his original game, an hour of cutscenes that's all about the characters falling for his tricks, getting confused, having debates with each other whether this sneaky race fan can be trusted or he has some nefarious plan up his sleeves. Now, on paper, it all sounds fun. You can do a lot of interesting things with this. All the puzzle pieces are there. And yet, in the final product, it all falls apart because Dronpa is a potato. He's fucking boring. He never does anything crazy. I don't think he ever really tricks anyone. Maybe Eggman a little at the end of the story, but that's about it. He just likes racing and talks a bit funny, but that's it. So you got all this story residue, this outline, this hype around this fun little trickster story, but it's carried by this complete nothing of a character who never even comes close to the kind of characterization required to make this whole event work. And I think that, out of all things, is what particularly makes Drompa a target for my ire. Not that he's annoying, not that he's boring, but just the sheer wasted potential. Him being so utterly dull and unremarkable, despite being at the center of a story that's pretending he's some kind of master trickster. Hey everyone, let's race! Okay, let's race! Good job, you just raced! We raced! Curses, the Tanuki tricked us again! Oh, you scoundrel! How dare you trick me!
The fact that Dodonpa has not once actually given anyone a reason to distrust him just makes characters like Blaze seem paranoid and bigoted.
And while Dodonpa became the poster child of this grievance of mine, it's really just because he's the most pure example of this, but really all characters suffer from this. I don't know if it's because we fans complained too much that all the characters were too dumbed down and brain dead in the 2010 meta era, but ever since then, all the characters have been so aggressively boring, especially Eggman, who's a complete potato as enforces, even though he should be at his most hammy and cheesy in the game where he's allegedly the ruler of the world. And yes, that brings us again to Infinite. He has the cool look. He gets the over-the-top, edgy theme song. You're giving him the power to create anything his mind can imagine. He's a leader of a squad of wolves, Eggman's second in command and commander of the world, in a bitter rivalry with Shadow, the terror of the world that brings all of Sonic's mighty friends to their knees. And yet, all we remember him doing Forces is scream at Shadow for being called weak. Because it's the only scene in the entire game where he properly acts with the energy and ham required for a villain of his stature. The rest of the game, he's a complete potato. I mean, he has a couple cute lines, but there's just no energy. His personality and energy just don't match the story context surrounding him. After introducing him with that song, you better make him live up to the hype. And if he's a bit cringe and people laugh, so what? You can still win them over if you give him interesting things to do. But you didn't, and that did way more damage to the character.
Until now, here the Chaotix Casefiles brings him back better than ever before. And how did they fix him? By finally cashing in on the promises the theme song made and making him go full ham. There we go, just add a pinch of him being pathetic and unhinged to add some humor, and it works perfectly.
Showing again Sonic Team's biggest weakness in writing their main games is the lack of energy and conviction they have in their characters and their world. They're cartoon characters, damn it! Celebrate their personalities, don't suppress it. And yes, that might be hypocritical coming from me, in the past bashing the writing of the 2010 era, making them too goofy for my taste there. But to my defense, my issue with the comedy of that era was that the characters were behaving against their natural personalities, not in favor of it. But anyway, enough. Let's talk about the actual Chaotix Casefile case. Specifically the cold open. So Chapter 0. This one really has me confused, especially after listening to the entire rest of the audio play. So Chapter 0 is basically a prologue, a cold open you might say, of the Chaotix dealing with a situation before the main event begins. Good, great, I love a good cold open, like a James Bond opening sequence or something, always fun. So sure, open to play with the Chaotix already wrapped up in a previous case in progress, so we get a demonstration of how they work before the main event starts. Except, that's not quite what happens here. This one really feels off to me, the scenario is weird. Basically, the Chaotix are home in the office, Sonic randomly comes over for a visit, gives them a package, has seemingly no curiosity what it is, immediately leaves, package contains a badnik, the Chaotix fight it, win, get ice cream, the end. It feels a little clunky and suspicious as a standalone action sequence. Sonic feels shoehorned in. Couldn't the Chaotix just get a package themselves? Especially since he immediately leaves before the action starts. And the random badnik in the package also feels like it needs elaboration. Like who sent it to them and why. I expected during the entire radio play for this event to be explained and be tied back to the main story. Perhaps the Sonic from the beginning was actually Infinite in disguise, trying to assassinate them, something like that. But if that was the case, it's never revealed, and even then it doesn't really work. Because Infinite didn't know at the time that the Chaotix were going to get involved with his case. And he has no personal beef with them, as far as I know. Not to mention, sending a single badnik is a really lame way to try and kill a Sonic character. I mean, they destroyed him by the dozens.
This was indeed an odd moment. They didn't even react like it was some special badnik that was more dangerous or anything. Did Eggman really just try to assassinate the Chaotix with a single buzz bomber completely unprompted?
I wonder if we're missing something. Or maybe there's an unfinished rewrite. I mean, I guess we did get a quick demonstration of the Chaotix modus operandi, I suppose, so in that regard it accomplished its cold open duties. Anyway, the main story. Besides our usual main characters, we get a handful of original characters. Most of them kind of filler, but I gotta say, I love Edna Knackerworth as a character. I get the impression that there's a bit of a subtle hidden joke with her, like she's introduced as a high society lady with a name, British accent, giant mansion and artifacts. Yet through Vector's observations and her own statements, I get the impression that she's really just a random old lady who just happens to win all this well from playing bingo or chow races, and treats her giant mansion and artifacts as if they're just trinkets. Fun idea, I love it. Would be fun if you learned that she still lives in her crummy old apartment, treating the entire mansion she has as just a little garden ornament she won in a chow race. And then let's discuss another character, Professor Victoria Tori. What's her deal? I mean, she's kind of fascinating in concept. I'm so used to new characters to get a big proper introduction in context. Here's the new exciting character doing their thing. So Tori started as a piece of concept art in the background of a Tales Tube episode, then keeps being teased even in the freaking third movie in the background. So here I am expecting them to be hyping up this exciting new character for the next main game. Yet I was wrong. Her big exciting introduction was randomly showing up as a joke character in a Tales Tube episode.
Professor Tori is an archaeologist and is particularly fascinated with the Sonic series' favorite world-building mechanics, the vague and cryptic Four Great Civilizations. This includes the second great civilization, also known as the Gaians. However, Professor Tori seems to have somehow completely missed all of the events of Sonic Unleashed, despite Sonic, Tails, and even Light Gaia himself walking in and out of her own university several times during the game. I have to assume it's meant to be a deliberate joke.
Yeah, 4 great civilizations, huh? I guess that's the new thing they'll be building up toward. But never mind her as a character. It's her marketing, her positioning I find interesting here. She shows up at this radio play now as a main supporting character, although with a bit of a different personality. More polite, slightly clumsy officer for gun. SDs by the Shattered Generations booklet, indeed. I guess her behavior is different here since she's manipulating the Chaotix to work for her rather than have a scholar argument with Tails. But yeah, cool. No problems with that. She's a fun character. But it's just a unique situation that a character's kind of bouncing between side projects like that. I'm not used to characters getting minor roles before their big introductions in the main games. I mean, heck, I'm still baffled by characters like Trip and Sage that took forever to get appearances in other media in general. I mean, I remember in the 90s, whenever there's a new character, they'll be all over the cartoons, the comic books. So they immediately leave a big cultural impact. Now, for those characters, their character impact is considerably lessened without the comics being able to give them additional context, something that someone like Trip could definitely use. So yeah, with Tori, I guess we're going in the other direction, now being all over the extra media before having her first official appearance.
Assuming she even gets a first official appearance. For all we know, she's meant to only bounce around these little side projects.
Is she like a representative for online Sonic content? Like how Whisper and Tangle are ambassadors for IDW and Styx is the ambassador for Sonic Boom? Does Tori represent just a general bonus internet material? Or is she an in-joke for Sega? Like she was a genuine deleted character from Unleashed that they just decided to revive for funsies? I mean, interesting to think about it. Guess time will tell. because her position as Begonia representative is not really needed. You already got Professor Pickle, his male assistant, and Tills for that. And as a gun representative, you already have Rouge to bed. And hey, don't get me wrong, I don't have a personal issue with that. By all means, finally do some world building and populate Sonic characters with more characters, locations, and functions. This series has been lacking in such details for such a long time, with each game just purely focusing on the main characters in an otherwise completely empty void and calling it a day.
It's fascinating considering it wasn't that long ago we heard Sonic Team had these weird stipulations, that only the main characters were allowed to do important things. Like there were no other characters allowed to invent anything other than Tails and Eggman, implying that every piece of technology we see in the series has been built by either a 10-year-old boy or a terrorist. Who do you want in charge of your public transportation, citizens of Earth? An overworked schoolboy, or the guy who turned the planet into a violent dictatorship for 6 months?
Guess they picked a terrorist, since Murder of Sonic confirms that Eggman runs the official train lines of Mobius. Love to see the advertising inside of the train carts. Well, okay, to be fair, they're implying Eggman installed illegal trains without the city officials knowing. Still, don't ask Sega who's actually responsible for running the train system.
Yet, here we have a peripheral character who is taking a position that could have been taken by either Tails or Rouge, depending on the Spagonia University or gun angle. Seems Sonic Team eased up on their rules, and I couldn't be happier. By the way, while we're talking about Professor Tori, it should be noted that we have reason to suspect she's related to Eggman. More specifically, it seems to be implied that she's Maria's little sister. Shadow Generations really expanded upon Gerald and Maria's backstories, and among the many things we've learned, 2 specific details stand out. One is that Maria has a sister, and another is that Gerald had 2 sons, one of which inherited his love for robotics, and the other inherited his love for archaeology. We can assume the son that specialized in robotics would be Eggman's father, indicating that Maria's father is an archaeologist. And wouldn't you know it, here we have a mysterious new human character that is only referred to by their first name, who happens to be an archaeologist. And none of that is even mentioning that Professor Gerald's journal was presented to Commander Towers personally by Professor Tori. But hey, that's just a theory. A captain theory.
Wait, are you implying her last name would be Robotnik? Tori Robotnik? Yet no one noticed, including Tails? That's like having a coworker with a last name Hitler without anyone noticing. But enough. Back to the audio play itself. So, another concept I recently found to be very fascinating. Detective stories with very little detectiving. I mean, one of the last Dissecteds I made before was me lamenting how terrible Sonic Team is in creating mystery stories. Even though almost all of their modern narratives all present themselves as some sort of mysterious plot filled with adventure and twists that's about to blow your mind. So I figured with an actual full-blown hard-boiled detective story starring the Chaotix, it'd be interesting to dissect it as one. Now, I'll say one thing in its favor at least. It's way better than any of Sonic Team's attempts, even if only by virtue of things happening in it. Sonic Team's stories tend to be a marathon of nothingness. Here we have characters running around, collecting clues, talking to each other, discovering things, investigating. Ooh, like an actual story rather than just empty dialogue to fill time. So hey, easy victory for the Chaotix Casefiles here, well done. Of course, beating Team Sonic Racing or even Sonic Frontiers mystery stories is like proving yourself to be a better athlete compared to a coma patient, so not much of a victory. Even though I know I probably shouldn't judge this radio play as an actual mystery story, but let's dissect it for a bit of fun anyway, because I've been fascinated by these detective stories without any actual detecting lately. Because man, I remember a few years back in 2009, oh, that's more than a few years. So the Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie, I was suddenly laughing at the climax where after a movie of punching, explosions, and big action set pieces, all of a sudden the movie wanted to transform itself back into a detective story and pretend it was about solving a mystery all along. Explaining how the villain in that movie pulled off his magic moves. I was, at that point, like, might as well make the villain a warlock for Sherlock Holmes to fight. Why not? I've seen him deal with Cthulhu and zombies before in video games and comics. Holmes can punch out a warlock or two. I mean, to be fair to the movie, it did have a few clever clues and resolutions. It was a nice mystery. It's just put inside of a movie where you completely forget it's even supposed to be one.
As modern audiences, we don't have the patience for an actual whodunit anymore. Paying attention to clues, solving the case, in a noisy movie theater. All the idiots in the audience will get bored and start playing on their cell phones. Keep the explosions coming.
I recently saw Zootopia 2, and it was really cute in how I don't think Judy or Nick ever really figure anything out themselves. It's just one big, crazy, endless action scene. And then our leads are completely lost, so a random character from the first movie has to be dragged in to point him into the next direction where the next action scene is going to take place.
Times have changed since The Great Mouse Detective, where Basil of Baker Street is actually seen investigating the clues he collects and making up a plan himself based on his investigation.
Bring us back to the Chaotix Casefiles. Clearly written for spectacle rather than presenting a puzzle for us viewers to figure out.
That's a bit unfair. There are some clues, the Phantom file name and the Red Spectre. Bit cheap for a whodunit, but they are clues, and many Sonic fans, including me obviously, managed to correctly solve the case as a result.
Now, let's look at the story from a whodunit perspective here. The mystery as presented. There's a thief stealing the MacGuffins. First had to be Knuckles, who denies it, and then Rouge, who also denies it. The Chaotix quickly figure out that neither is the culprit. The real thief is masquerading as them. Considering you can hardly pretend to be either Rouge or Knuckles by merely putting on a hat and raincoat, it's pretty obvious we're dealing with a shapeshifter right away. However, the audio play itself never has the Chaotix really discuss plots or clues among themselves and are mostly just rushing from set piece to set piece, so they don't really give us much of a heads up who could be possible culprits. Now, Mimic, a character from the IDW who can shapeshift, gets a very dramatic mention and is the only one of the possible shapeshifters who gets explicitly discussed when Whisper's backstory is explained, but ends up being a complete red herring. Of course, he's supposed to be dead, as shown in the IDW comics. Then we get another suspect, Sage. It's explicitly mentioned here that Robotnik's little darling is just the AI, and the girl body we see is a hologram, apparently. I did not know this, but sure, why not? It's the best explanation we ever get about how Sage is supposed to work, because Frontiers kept her origin frustratingly unclear. Either way, if the girl body she has is just a hologram projected by the AI, then it's possible she can turn her holographic body into anything else, including Knuckles and Rouge. Sure, we never see her do anything like this. Most we get is her switching colors at the end of Frontiers, but this sounds like a reasonable possibility.
I don't think that's how Sage works. She's not just a hologram, she's a hard-light construct. She says this to Vector, and this is also confirmed in the IDW comics, where it also further clarifies that she has a physical form and can interact with the world. We also see Eggman manually programming new shoes for her in official artwork, so this suggests she cannot just change her appearance at will.
What? But... Okay, I didn't read the latest IDW issues yet.
Of course, Infinite is the suspect the series wants us to figure out, but there's two problems. One, we have no idea what became of him after Sonic Forces. With its wishy-washy attitude, it's easy to assume Eggman killed him and Sonic Team was just too spineless to say it out loud. Even so, we know the Phantom Ruby was taken from him, as Eggman has it afterwards, so Infinite no longer has the ability to create his reality-warping illusions anyway. Which means that actually, Infinite isn't really a suspect, he's likely dead, and definitely no longer has the reality-warping powers that made him a suspect to begin with.
Besides these three, I would argue there's a hypothetical fourth suspect, our good friend Dodonpa. He's a Tanuki, who are known to be morphing tricksters. I mean, Dodonpa never demonstrates this ability, just like he never demonstrates any personality trait besides light snobbiness, but I digress. If we're going by stereotypes and broad assumptions, he could potentially be our reality-warping thief. So really, without additional information, Dodonpa is really the only plausible culprit. Mimic and Infinite don't come into the picture unless we're explicitly told they survived, and in Infinite's case, even has a way to get his powers back, which we aren't until the reveal. I would argue even during the reveal it's not really explained. Infinite is actually the least likely suspect of all. Of course, the mistake I make, silly me, is by reasoning within the parameters of the story and through the clues we're actually given. But instead we're doing the wacky four-wall breaking thing where the actual trill of thinking is supposed to be Red Spectre could be a pun on about the Ruby Phantom Ruby, sorry. And therefore it's Infinite, even though he doesn't have the Phantom Ruby anymore. In fact, I have no idea where the damn Phantom Ruby is. It kind of disappears out of the plot, just like everyone else in Sonic Forces, because Sonic Forces story gets...
Even better, Eggman was the real owner of the Phantom Ruby, or at least the guy who found the Phantom Ruby lying on his doorstep. With that pesky supernatural gem being able to distort dimensions and realities like that, who's to say the Phantom Ruby wouldn't have teleported to someone else's front porch? Omochao could have become the new carrier of the Phantom Ruby for all we know.
So the astroscopic lenses the story's all about just happen to have the exact same powers as the Phantom Ruby. What a wacky coinky-dink. And Infinite somehow managed to get one off-screen by unexplained help, so now he's Infinite again with full powers, while no one else ever bothers to use those astroscopic lenses powers themselves. Conveniently enough for Infinite, I guess. So then, let's go back to our list of suspects. So the only reason why Infinite becomes a suspect again is because he happens to have one of those lenses that happens to give him the exact same reality warping powers again. And we're never told the circumstances of how Infinite got his hands on the first lens, besides a vague mention about a mysterious benefactor. So really, you could have put any random character in that position and have them to be equally valid as a solution to this mystery. Heck, the story never really gives us an overview how many lenses there are or where they're at least not until they become part of the plot, so you can't really figure out anything. Some character, any equally valid, just happens to get reality warping powers and starts stealing the rest. I mean, I guess it isn't any of the people physically present during the heists, but everyone else, including ones who weren't properly introduced in the plot yet, such as Infinite, are valid suspects, so good luck. Look, I'm just saying it wasn't really designed to work as an actual detective story. You're meant to look at it more superficial. Words remind me of fan-favorite characters, so that character is the whodunit, case closed, logic be damned. This is why I brought up Sherlock Holmes earlier, because I find it so funny that in a lot of his movies too, where they happily throw the mystery mechanics out of the window for the sake of, it was Moriarty all along! Because that's what the original books were all about all the time.
I'd like to point your attention to the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime.
There was no curious incident with the dog at the nighttime.
The curious incident was Moriarty all along! Curse you, Holmes! You got me again!
So yeah, it's just a series of action set pieces and fan service moments. I mean, fair enough.
Speaking of action set pieces, we have to compliment the writers for coming up with natural ways to get the cast to narrate the action. As someone with experience writing audio plays, the problem with them is that you can't see anything, so characters always have to say out loud what action they're performing, which can make action seem real clunky. This is why superheroes and manga characters tend to always verbalize their actions to a ridiculous degree. It's a leftover from their way of speaking in radio shows, and as a way to add clarity to a story with little to no visuals. The folks at Realm know what they're doing, it seems. Most action scenes usually have built-in logic for why characters are yelling what's happening. Either they're commentators of a race, or the lights are out and characters are warning each other what's happening for the sake of teamwork, or Vector is stuck in a cage and can't be part of the action, so he uses his position to order instructions and acts as their lookout. That works. Kudos to the writers. Well done.
One final thing about the story that got me a bit confused is the banter with Eggman at the end. So Infinite is about to kill them all. And Eggman tells the rest of the gang to join him and fight Infinite together, which I thought they were already gonna do. And then Sonic gets angry and refuses. So Eggman leaves, which Sonic gets angry about again. So you don't want Eggman to fight with you, but you also don't want him to leave? Like, what do you want?
It was especially weird since they already did this Eggman deputizing Sonic thing in Sonic Frontiers. And Sonic just played along with it because he knew trying to fight both the End as well as Eggman's ego wasn't worth it. But here Sonic's much more hostile towards the idea, refusing to even hear him out, despite how competent they are whenever they've teamed up in the past.
I mean, it would have worked if Eggman presented a specific strategy.
Sonic, you and friends go get yourself shot to distract Infinite. I'll just sit here and eat some cookies.
And Sonic specifically disagrees with that strategy. Then it would work, but as written now, it feels like it's the concept of working together itself that he's upset about. Bit awkward writing. Oh well. But yeah, there we have it, the Chaotix Casefiles. Despite all my endless complaining, I really enjoyed it. It's a good show, it's very fun to listen to. Complaining about it is how I enjoy things, damn it. Yeah. So, really happy that the side characters got a moment to shine. Great beginning to Sonic's new anniversary year, I guess. Can't wait to see what we'll get next. Perhaps a crossover with SpongeBob, or a crossover with Godzilla, or a crossover with the Smurfs, or a crossover with the Care Bears, or geez, I cannot even come up with a sarcastic punchline because it's all happening. Just make a Lego Dimensions 2 already if you want these crossovers so badly.
Look forward to a future Sonic Rumble crossover event featuring Hamlet and Count Chocula.
Oh, before I forget, this Dissected episode was actually a crossover with Godzilla as well. Godzilla, you got anything to say?
Cheers!